we got a new power trio in the building tonight, and it was formed tonight. And Kate Chastain, John, Phaedra, fantastic, fantastic. But we're gonna get on into it. Another great. This is a good episode. When the round table is in the episode, it's a great episode. But yeah, thumbs up the video, drop the comments down below. Please do that. Engagement is super duper important. If you don't know, go watch the last video I posted. You see all that engagement. It's one of the highest videos I've ever posted on here. But yeah, please thumbs up the video. Please drop a comment. Please subscribe. Just do that before we get into it. That's all you got to do. Is free. I don't ask y'all for nothing else. Do that. Subscribe, share. But even if you don't want to share, just thumbs up the video and drop a comment, because that's going to share it for me. But yeah, let's go. All right, so we get to breakfast. Breakfast happens, and Sheree and CT, they are the first to walk in. And CT's nervous because he thinks Trishelle could possibly get murdered, and if she does get murdered, he's going to feel bad because he had the opportunity to save her and he didn't, and he would feel bad about it. And he feels, he asked Sheree, who does she feel is most likely to be murdered? And she says she feels that Bergie and Trishelle are the most at risk to be murdered. And I'm gonna preface this right now. Trishelle, I get the game strategy part of what she's gonna do this episode, and I'm gonna get into it. But there's a lot of things that made me start to look at what everybody else has been saying about you. The rumors that everybody's been saying about you. I've been trying not to look at it, but I know Trishelle's past too. But it's starting to look really clear here. But I'm gonna elaborate on it later on. But yeah. But Phaedra and Sandra, they walk in next. CT ends up kissing Phaedra on the cheek. I'm sorry, I can't help but mention it. I'm not the type to like shipping people, grown adults, but I love their vibe together. I don't know why I do. But CT is saying that Parvati is already on everybody's radar. Sandra says that if she gets the vibe that Parvati is a traitor, she's going to rally the troops and get her ass out. So they say that Peter can also be possibly a traitor, and they think because he's so annoying too, and he's so divisive. So John ends up walking in next. He thinks that Trishelle got murdered because she's bright and savvy, and she's very frightened. And she was frightened last night, and she did not get a shield. So Peter and Kevin end up walking in next. Peter's thankful that John has saved him because he knows he would have been out, and he knows that his two most trusted partners in the game, which are Trishelle and Bergie, are essentially, one of them is probably going to get taken out, because if you can't take him out, you got to weaken him. And weakening him is by getting rid of one of those two, which everybody knows them three were always in cahoots. So that's what he's thinking is going to happen. And then Kevin ends up wanting Parvati to walk through, because if she's murdered, he doesn't know who the traitor would be. But Kate and MJ walk in next. Kate thought that she was going to end up getting murdered, but she feels like people trust her, and she says people shouldn't trust me. And it's just like, we know Kate is a faithful, and it's like her saying that is funny, but Kate don't care. Kate's gonna say what she want to say. She's going to say how she feels. Like, even if she's wrong about it, she's gonna say how she feels. And essentially, her saying that they shouldn't trust her, she could be wrong in what she's saying, so it makes sense as to why she should say that. Peter ends up saying that there's no way that Parvati isn't coming back, and Phaedra says that she wants to protect Parvati, but it's becoming difficult. So at this point, it's Parvati, Trishelle, and Bergie. Those are the only three that have not walked in, so it's one of them three. So in walks who? Parvati and Trishelle, which means Bergie has been murdered. So CT is thankful that Trishelle walked in. They hugged. Of course, he's excited that she walked in because she didn't go home. She didn't get murdered due to him not saving her. So he can at least have that. So if she ends up getting murdered in the future, at least it didn't go by his decision to not save her. So Parvati ends up telling Phaedra at the murder that she wanted to murder Peter, but Bergie is the next best thing. And Phaedra just went along with it. She's like, yeah, whatever, let's do it. So Bergie ends up reading his letter. He says that he felt like he played the best game that he could have played, and he's learned a lot about himself playing the game, which I think is true too. Because Bergie, coming into the game, I didn't want him on the show. I'm like, I didn't want him on Love Island, because I'm like, he literally is so out of place. Like, you can tell he just did not, he had no game on the show. He didn't know how to approach women. He didn't know how to have conversations. He was always super nervous. Like, he had no game. He just looked like he was just out of his league. And like a show like Love Island, it's a bunch of horny people on there literally just basically being horny. And that's just not who he is. And I felt like he was out of place. Like, and it's funny because he ends up finding love, and I believe they're still together to this day. But I just felt like he was on the wrong show. And then with him being the one for Love Island to be the Love Island representation, when there's so many other people that they could have chose, I was like, there's no reason as to why he's on the show. But he was on the show and he actually did really well. He did really well. I was actually impressed with the game that he played. And I was okay with him being here. At the end of the day, he did a good job. So they raised their cups to Bergie. And Phaedra's talking about, ooh, that was good when she drank. Phaedra was kind of slipping here. I'm like, Phaedra, you got to stop doing all of that. Even though if she did stop doing all of that, it could look suspicious too, because she always does it. But to me, it was looking suspicious. And of course, Trishelle is sitting there looking at her. She's paying attention to everything she's doing. She also ends up saying too that she wanted some cream cheese and some dessert. And the way she said it was just so nonchalant after we just found out so-and-so got murdered. And of course, Trishelle is still looking at her. So Trishelle says that she doesn't talk a lot of game and she doesn't throw out any names, which is why she thinks that Phaedra is a traitor. She says that she plays poker. She's a poker player. And Phaedra has this twitch in her eye, which in a poker, I guess when you're playing poker, if somebody has a twitch in their eye, kind of gives away what they're doing. Random. I've never seen Phaedra have a twitch in her eye, but okay. But Alan, and I guess maybe it's the same thing I do, because I normally make little, like I just did, like I do the same stuff that she does. I don't know. Maybe it's just, I don't know. But they're trying to find at this point, they're trying to find any reason to pay her as a target. Alan walks in and confirms the murder, so they ended up dispersing. Trishelle and Peter, they end up going to the side, and Trishelle ends up realizing that Phaedra has more people that would not vote for her to be banished, and it makes more sense to get her out now. Let me preface this. I understand where she's going with this, because it is a logical thing to think of. Like, if you got somebody who is super covered, you don't want to leave that person in the game, especially when there's not that many people left. Because if there's a lot of people around that are still going to vote for her, it's going to be a lot harder for you to convince them that this person is a traitor. So I understand that. I'm going to make sure I brought that out, because it's going to get, as I'm going through, y'all know I like to keep it chronological. But as I'm going through, I'm going to elaborate on why I said that. But she's saying that she tells, she ends up telling Peter that Phaedra is super smart and she's never worried. And Dan is feeding them. He was feeding them a traitor when he had actually gotten banished. And she said he's doing it to feel like the superhero. And essentially, she's right. She is right in saying that. That's exactly what he did. And that's exactly why he ended up targeting Phaedra, was to get the heat off of him and hopefully get her out. So Kevin comes in and then they try to check his head, check his temperature, see where he's at. He says that Parvati still on Parvati, and Trishelle starts pushing for Phaedra. She then mentions the twitch in her eye. And Kevin starts agreeing, knowing damn well he ain't ever seen that before. He just literally just bit off of what she was saying, because Kevin has no mind of his own. Kevin goes with them and then decides to like act like he knows what they're talking about, act like certain things are happening. Me, I'd be looking at him, because I'm like, you don't really come up with anything off the dome. You're always like tagging up on what somebody else threw out and then trying to like co-sign it. That right there would have made me look at him like, oh, you weird. You got some things going on about you that I just don't trust. But Trishelle ends up saying that getting Phaedra out over Parvati would make more sense, because Parvati is a wounded bird. It's just the terms that she's using when she's choosing to target a black woman over a white woman, which is just, being black, it's kind of hard to watch that. Even though I understand why she's doing it, just the certain terms is just, it ain't sitting right with me. But Peter ends up saying that if Parvati gets through, she'll end up banishing him, or she'll end up murdering him. And Trishelle's like, we got to get her, like, you just get on her side, try and find a way to get on her side and push for Phaedra. And Peter's like, I'm trying to make sure all of us get through the night. And essentially, if we keep Parvati here, she's gonna kill me. If I don't have a shield, if I'm not protected, you let her go through this banishment and get a chance to murder, she's gonna murder me. So at this point, Peter's like, why would you not get her out now? And I'm like, exactly. That's my whole thing. Why not get her out now when you trying to work with Peter and you know she's after Peter, and you know any chance she gets, she's gonna murder him, but you don't want to do it because you think Phaedra is the traitor, which you're right, but he's right too in that moment, because essentially you're trying to protect the faithfuls. If you don't get out somebody who you know for a fact is a traitor and already has a lot of suspicion and a lot of heat on them, it's stupid, because they're going to give her a chance to take out another faithful. So Peter was right in that moment, but he sat there and let her literally push her narrative and get it in his head. And she was like, Parvati would be willing to work with him and she'll do anything to save her ass, which is true. Parvati will do anything to save her ass, and she will work with him to save her ass. So she ends up saying, like, let's do that, because I think she'll end up planning to vote for Phaedra over herself if it comes down to that, which she would. So she ended up convincing him to do it, and they ended up doing it. She's excited because she's like, Phaedra, you're gonna go. You're gonna go home tonight. Is she? But we get to the next scene. Peter ends up pulling Parvati to pretty much try and get her to believe that he wants to work with her. And he's trying to get her to turn on Phaedra. I'm like, fuck you. But Peter then asked her when she started to feel as if their relationship was starting to deteriorate. And she mentions the secret thing, like how she didn't keep his secret whenever he told her about the shield stuff. And she says that she didn't know if she could trust him, and she ended up trusting the wrong person, which was Dan. As they're having this conversation, MJ is eavesdropping outside the door. I'm like, good, MJ, good. So Parvati ends up saying that from day one, she felt like she was targeted by Larsa, and Dan was the one that was actually sitting there looking out for her. And MJ is still sitting there listening. MJ's got that ear up to that door. But Parvati, and I'm glad she did, because the two of them sitting in a room having a conversation just by themselves makes no sense when they've been at each other the entire time like this. But Parvati ends up saying that she doesn't trust him, but if she can convince him that she's a faithful, it'll be good for her game, because people will believe him, because a lot of people are believing him as like he's the head faithful. So she's willing to work with him if it keeps the heat off of her, but she'll take a shot if she gets a chance to. But MJ ends up going into the other room, telling Trishelle in front of, she's telling Trishelle, but she's got CT, Sandra, and Kate in there with her, that them two are in there having a conversation, and it's just not adding up. Like, how are y'all having a conversation when y'all literally have been at each other? And Kate was saying it's like her begging for her life. That's essentially what she's in there doing, begging for her life. And she's very persuasive because she used to be a yoga teacher. Kate is hilarious. I love Kate. I love her. And she said Parvati used to be a yoga teacher. And from her experience with her previous yoga class, where she was trying to lead the yoga session, and the yoga teacher had used her yoga voice to get her to stay. And what did she say? Kate said that them yoga teachers, they use that voice to convince you to stay in hell, aka the workout. Everybody started laughing. I was laughing. It was hilarious. But you get John, Sheree, and Phaedra. They're in a room talking, and Sheree is asking Sheree after Parvati leaves, who was on your list. And Phaedra was like, you don't want to accuse anybody but Peter, because he's acting so crazy and so sporadic that it makes you sus of him. Peter also then tells Parvati, because they're still in the room talking, and he tells her that he may have been wrong about her. This is where he's trying to work her. And Parvati's falling for it. She's like, oh, okay. And then they ended up cheersing and stuff. They start looking at each other super like romantically to me. That's the way I took it. I'm like, why are y'all looking at each other? They was gazing in each other's eyes. I don't know if they both have significant others, but that was quite interesting to watch. But he's trying to convince her to get Phaedra to get people off of her back. And she said that she's willing to do whatever at this point. Like, anything to get the heat off of her, she's going to do it. I don't blame her, because I would too at this point. But Parvati says that she adores Phaedra and she doesn't want to turn on her, but she's trying to get the heat off of her. So she's going to do whatever she can. So they get to the mission. The mission is pretty much an escape room. But before we get to that, they're in the cars driving over there, and Trishelle is sitting there pushing her narrative with Phaedra. So she's in the car with Parvati, John, and Sandra. She's sitting there saying that she doesn't think that she's a traitor. Talking about Parvati. She doesn't think that Parvati is a traitor, but she does think, and Peter doesn't also think that Peter also doesn't think that Parvati is a traitor. And she's going off on her list of reasons as to why she thinks Phaedra is a traitor. And Trishelle says that every morning Phaedra is never nervous. She says that she's nervous that if they don't get Phaedra out, she's going to go take the money at the end if she wins. And I'm like, you're talking to Parvati. You think she wouldn't take the money? And I'm like, too, you sitting there saying that you don't think that Parvati is a traitor. And this is where I started to think, okay, maybe the rumors are true, because you know for a fact that that woman is a traitor. And you said that you wanted to do everything in your power to get Phaedra out. But why are you sitting here trying to say that Parvati's not a traitor? Like, to me, the logic is not making sense there. That's not making sense. But Sandra is still suspicious of Parvati. She knows Parvati. Sandra knows Parvati more than anybody on the show. And she's not suspicious of Phaedra at this point. You can see it all over her face, and she's not. But they ended up getting to the creepy cabin. I forgot to mention this, but Alan told them that there's going to be a guest here at this cabin for the mission. And guess who it is? Dr. Will Kirby from season 2 of Big Brother, who has started to age. Will's season was what, 2002, I want to say. So yeah, he's up there in age now. But Will ends up welcoming them into the cabin, and as they all get in, the cabin is creepy. It looks very weird, and Will's acting weird. But they get in there, and he locks the door behind him, shuts it very creepily, locks it very creepily, and then he ends up opening up a window, a little peephole window, and tells them the most fun thing about this place is finding their way out. And he shuts the window and traps them in there. So it's an escape room, like I said, and they all started screaming. So he ends up telling them that they have $25,000 that are up for grabs, and they got 30 minutes to get out. So anybody who doesn't escape, the earning reduces by $1,000. And anybody that wants to quit, they have to say the safe word. So the time begins. They start looking for the map. They ended up finding it under a tablecloth on the table. Sandra ends up finding the tunnel that they use to get through to get out. So CT and Trishelle, they go through first. It's too tight for me. That's number one. There's a lot of things in here I would have quit for sure. I would have been the one to say, shut bye. I would not be going down that tunnel. It's too tight. I'm very, very, very claustrophobic. No way in hell that would happen. But they end up going out through there. John, Sandra, and Parvati were next through the tunnel. It's super dark too. That's another thing. It's super dark and it's super tight. Fuck no. But Kate ends up seeing a trap door up above her as she's trying to turn the lights on so they can see. And she was like, I'm not doing that. Fuck no. You could come over here and do it, Kevin. And Will start squirting shit through the windows to throw them off. Like he's doing all this stuff to distract them. Maggots, worms, and roaches start dropping. They start dropping that shit on top of them. I would have been gone. Roaches? No. Bye. Maggots? Bye. Bugs? Bye. Bye. I'm not sitting in there with that. Hell no. I get so fidgety and my skin is so sensitive too. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Double negative. Like tight spaces and bugs and shit. Fuck no. Yeah, Trishelle ends up eventually getting $5,000. Kevin ends up getting bugs thrown on him. MJ was the first one. MJ said, fuck no. I'm out of here. Peace. $1,000 gone. CT ends up finding the shield and is being very strategic while he finds it and decides that he wants to help Trishelle get the shield. Smart. He's trying to get her trust back, and it worked. But Peter then tells Trishelle, I cannot stand saying Trishelle's name because it's so hard for me to say it. But he tells her to keep it a secret that she got the shield and don't tell anybody that she got it. He's trying to work a plan. Sheree, she killed me this whole mission. She had me in here cackling. But they drop bugs on her, and of course she starts losing it, screaming her ass off. And I was dying laughing. But Phaedra, Kate, Sheree got the fuck up out of there too, just like MJ said, hell no, I'm done. So they get out and Sheree is still screaming. The shit was cracking me up. But John ends up getting out of the tunnel first with 2 pieces of gold. They got 2 minutes remaining. CT ends up getting back up to the house to see that Kevin's the only one up there. Everybody else done quit. And he ends up going back down the tunnel with him. Trishelle ends up getting out of the tunnel. CT ends up getting he ends up getting out, but then going back because Trishelle's like, there's another thing of gold in there, go get it. So everybody else, Peter, Parvati, Kevin, Sandra, CT, Trishelle, they all finished. John finished, obviously. So the quitters end up going and joining them. Alan lets him know that $15,000 was won, but they lost the $4,000 because of the girls that quit. And their total was $11,000 to add to the final pot. So he confirms that somebody got a shield, and he's asking who won the shield and who would like to share it. Trishelle says absolutely nothing. So they head back to the house. Peter is still working on Parvati about the votes, and Parvati says the jury's still out with him. She don't know if she trusts him, and she don't trust him. And she wants to pull John because she feels like John has a lot of pull in the house, which he does. And she wants to try and work on him. So she goes in there and turns them white woman tears on. When I tell you she turned them on, she turned them on. And she started talking about how she feels like when she's under attack, the Karen moment. The Karen moment was very strong. But whatever. I mean, I understand why she's doing it. She's playing a game. But she said, when I feel like I'm under attack, I become icy. And then she starts saying because she trusted the wrong people, the target got stuck on her back. John says this is the first time that he's seen her so emotional, and out of everybody he's met in this game, nobody displays greater guts and character than she does. And he says that she had demonstrated that she's a faithful player that wouldn't chop his head off. And she says, she would never, I would never. And she's so proud. And she's like, I realize if I pull this off, I have a future in acting. Not because of this, but like I've been saying all season, you are Angelina Jolie's daughter. You would be a perfect Saul. In this moment, I was like, John, ain't no way you buying that shit. But it looked like he was buying it. Put a pin in it. I'm putting a pin in it. John is a star. I told y'all last week he was literally taking over Peter's role for me. Cause Phaedra's here, Peter's here, or Peter was here, and John was like right here. John's like right here now. Kate is right here. It's them three for me. But where was I at? Phaedra is also, she's in a room eating alone, like just over there being Phaedra. Ooh, look at this. This is good. Alone. I'm like, Phaedra, you should be realizing right here, nobody's around me. I need to start finding where everybody's at. Because at this point, that would have went off in my mind. Okay, nobody's talking to me. Nobody's around me. People are probably plotting against me. That would have been my thought. So I'm like, Phaedra, go find somebody. Go break up these conversations. Kate, CT, John, and Trishelle are in a room talking. And Kate says since they've been here, at least since she's been here, all she's been hearing is Parvati's name being mentioned as a traitor. So she wants to finish her. Trishelle then starts bringing up Phaedra. It's Phaedra with Trishelle. She starts listing those reasons again. She says that she knows that CT is close to Phaedra, but she wants to drop some points and she wants to let him know that she is voting for her. So she now claims that she is less convinced that Parvati is a traitor than she is Phaedra. I said, oh, really, bitch? Really? Really? Oh, so you're now completely done thinking that Parvati's a traitor. You're done with that. But you're so gung-ho on Phaedra. This is where the racist stuff comes in. Like, this is where it starts to look bad for you. It looks bad because you are targeting her so heavily. Was targeting Peppermint so heavily. It's a pattern. But CT ends up saying that he's voting for a traitor, but whatever's appealing and what's compelling, he's going to hear it. Kay ends up saying, this is somebody that y'all spent the whole game saying is a traitor, talking about Parvati. Now in the final hour, you want to start throwing out Phaedra. I said, catch it, Kate. And she said it was weird. And Trishelle ends up saying that Phaedra is hard to get in the end, which she's not lying. But Sandra says that's why you want her name to be brought up today. And Phaedra starts walking around as they're still having this conversation, and she's looking for everybody. And I'm like, that's what she should know, that it's just not looking good for you. And CT says CT says, does she know? And Trishelle says that no, she doesn't know because she's a good arguer. I don't want her to know because she is a good arguer. Of course she is. But Trishelle says that maybe she takes terrible notes, and if she's wrong, she'll burn her notebook. As she said that, Phaedra comes walking in, and it gets awkwardly silent. Like, when I tell you it's so awkward, if Phaedra didn't know that she was up for it, she should have known then. But Kate ends up getting up to go to the bathroom. Everybody else starts trickling out. And Phaedra says today feels weird, but she feels the obvious person to get out is Parvati, and she feels like she's not expecting her name to come up. I'm like, Phaedra, you didn't catch that. You didn't catch it. Round table time. 25 minutes in. Round table time. Trishelle is saying that Phaedra got 3 ride or dies, and I'm sitting there thinking, who was it? And I know it's Sheree. That's number 1. Number 2 is probably MJ, and number 3 is probably Kate. That's probably who she was referring to. And she said, like, even if she had proof, they would not vote for her. You're probably right. But I ain't mad at it. But Phaedra is not wearing the outfit that Peter and her had that little spat where she was like, I don't have to kiss your ass for a rose. So then I knew she was not going home. I was like, ain't no way she going home now. So I was excited. I got to rest. I was excited to see how she was going to twist this to get herself to another week. And she did. She did fantastic, as always. But they begin. Parvati starts. She says that she knows her name has been out there, pretty much reiterating everything she said to John. She says her name's been out there about her acting weird and being quiet. And she says they're right. She becomes a brick wall when she feels attacked. She's made poor decisions on who to trust. And she says that she knows she's in a predicament because she trusted a traitor. Trishelle then jumps in and says that she's been going over her notes about when Parvati started coming up as a traitor. She said she didn't have much besides her acting weird and being quiet, which aren't compelling enough to her. So she then says, Phaedra, I got so much on you. She says, I'll start from the lowest and I'll end with the highest. So she says that she's never seemed surprised about who was being murdered every morning. Phaedra says, okay, and what makes you think that? Trishelle says, you're never nervous and you don't react. Phaedra said she's nervous. She's always been nervous. She says, I don't know what you want me to do. She said, I'm not frantic like you. I'm like, exactly, because I would have been the same way. I'm not the type of person that I'm not going to be super like animated. Trishelle is very animated. Phaedra, she's extra, but when it comes to certain things, she ain't that animated. When it comes to certain things, I wouldn't be that animated either. So I don't feel like that's a valid reason, but I guess it is a reason because you playing the game, you're trying to find any reason to point a finger. But she says she never seems surprised, and Trishelle says that you're never nervous, and she ends up shutting her down. And when I say she, I'm talking about Phaedra shut down Trishelle. Kate starts smirking. Kate was cracking me up. This is where I knew Kate. Kate is like the president of the Phaedra fan club because you could tell she was rooting for Phaedra to just shut them all down. And anytime she did, she started smirking. So Trishelle then saying that I'll start with the lowest, and Phaedra said, "Okay, well then keep going then." I said, "You better get her." Like Phaedra was so composed, and that's why she's always gonna do well in these roundtables. She never sweats. And it's funny because Trishelle is the one shooting at Phaedra, but she was the one that was sweating. But we'll get to it. But Trishelle says her most compelling is because Dan is smart. And she knew that if he went into the round table and put a traitor up as somebody who he suspected, that it would absolve him being considered as a traitor. And he essentially was trying to throw that out there to pretty much make sure that the faithfuls knew that he was not a traitor and he wanted to get a traitor out. She thinks that he turned on Phaedra, and that's why she thinks that she's a traitor. She's not lying. It is true. That's exactly what happened. But John says, what incentive would Dan have to put her, talking about Phaedra, out knowing that he was going to be banished? And Phaedra says she feels that he would protect the traitors and wouldn't give somebody up that is a traitor. That's why she felt that he wouldn't do that. So Kevin's dumb ass starts talking, and he says when he starts talking about somebody who he's suspicious of, Phaedra starts having that eye that starts to freak out. And Phaedra started chuckling like, please, be for real. I ain't never heard that shit before in my life, ever. Trishelle, of course, then comes chiming in and talking about, I've seen it before. I've seen it too. And Phaedra said, oh, Lord, here we go. So Kevin then asks, has she grown up with twitches? And Phaedra said, I've never in my life heard that. Like, what are you talking about? Kevin has no evidence. He has no thought process behind anything. He's just jumping off of what somebody else said to try and tag up on it. Kevin is the dumbest player. He might be dumber than Sheree in this game. Sheree is at least smart enough to sit back and shut up. Like, if she ain't have nothing to say, she ain't gonna say it. Kevin starts talking and it sounds so stupid. But CT ends up asking what John thinks. This is when John put it down right here. John says his intuition and says Parvati could be, I wrote it down verbatim. He said Parvati could be the Duchess of Deception and a Mistress of Murder. She looked shook. He said they started because they all started looking shook too. Trishelle's mouth dropped. He says that he heard what she said in relation to Dan, but she was in cahoots with him and pretty much was his partner in crime when it came to the murders. He said that she's been worried about banishment. This is a valid point. He says she's always been worried about banishments, but has always had like this serene energy about her when it came to the threat of murder. He then brings up last week at the sacrifice ritual, everybody was given the opportunity to plead their case as to why they should be saved, and she sat there and said nothing. He said, because you knew you wasn't going to get murdered. I was like, oh. And she was shook. She was shook because you knew at that point, going into this, she already thought that she had him because she thought she got him when she pulled on them tears. He turned the shit back on her. So Parvati ends up saying that she's been scared until recently because of the suspicion that's been on her. And she said she felt like the more suspicion on her, the traitors would want to keep her around because it would be smart to keep somebody around with all this suspicion. So she then says she's been more scared of being banished because of the suspicion, which is valid. But Peter then pipes in and says that he hasn't seen true faithful qualities in Phaedra in regards to the fear that comes naturally with being a faithful. And she says, you're the king of the faithfuls, is that right? And he says he can't erase Dan's pitch out of his mind. And Kate ends up chiming in and says, y'all were all so y'all were so forward about Parvati being the traitor yesterday. And then Trishelle jumps in and says, until she read her notes again. And Kate said that those reasons all just evaporate. I said, thank you, Kate. Thank you. Thank you. So Peter then says that he had a conversation with Parvati that shifted his view. And he's not saying it's 100%, but it's coming down. And Phaedra says because there was a backdoor deal that was going on. That's why it's coming down. Trishelle dropped her mouth was on the floor. I said, pick your jaw up. Pick that jaw up. But Phaedra said when she was in the armor room, this is when Phaedra was getting it. I was like, I'm so proud of you. Phaedra said when she was in the armor room with Peter and Parvati last episode, Peter made an interesting comment about wanting to work with Parvati and how she ended up removing herself, talking about Phaedra. She ended up removing herself because she didn't want to be a part of the conversation. Peter said when it happened, he was just being cocky, thinking that he had got her. I'm like, okay, wrong. You was just trying to save your ass because you knew that you didn't have a shield. So Peter and Parvati trying to match stories, pretty much trying to be in cohorts. And John is sitting there looking so sussed out about it too. Kate suddenly says, oh, suddenly you changed your mind. And Peter says, why are you defending Phaedra so much? Kate says, I think it's so weird because you've been so Parvati. And now right now you trying to do this. And he ends up cutting her off. When he cut her off, she said, I'm not done speaking. I said, you better fucking get him. Kate is so real. She is so real. But she said, I'm defending Phaedra because it's weird that you said that you wanted to work with Parvati. And then you switching it up to Phaedra. And then you're relying on this Dan thing, giving out a clue on the way out. And she's like, no, he didn't just give out a clue. He just sucked at playing this game. I was like, Phaedra. I'm like, Kate does not play games. And she's not lying. Dan did play a horrible game. Dan played a terrible game when it comes to this game. But it's time to vote. MJ votes for Parvati. Phaedra votes for Parvati due to Dan's scenario. She thinks that Parvati was a great traitor, but it's time for her to go. Sandra votes for Parvati because of John's valid points. Peter votes for Phaedra. John votes for Parvati. Parvati votes for Phaedra because of Trishelle's points. Kevin votes for Phaedra. Trishelle votes for Phaedra. Sheree votes for Parvati. Of course, she real. I was like, don't you dare vote for Phaedra. She would never vote for Phaedra. CT votes for Parvati. And he said he can't banish somebody who lit his torch based on the words of a known liar. I said, thank you, CT. Kate then votes for Parvati, and Parvati is banished. That's the second traitor gone. Phaedra, they was trying to come for Phaedra, and Phaedra is the last original standing. I know that's right. But Trishelle ends up mouthing to Kevin that she's a traitor. So I'm like, okay, so why didn't you vote her out then, bitch? Why you didn't vote her out? You knew she was a traitor all along. Why did you not vote her out? That's where people say that you racist. Because it just does not look right. But everybody claps because she gets up there and says the last 2 years she's been aligning herself with truth and integrity, and she wanted to play a faithful game when she got there, but she's not a faithful. She's a traitor. So Trishelle ends up saying she's going to burn her notebook. Yeah, shut up. Because at this point, everybody going to be looking at you. But Phaedra gets emotional. Don't know if that was genuine or not, but whatever. Sandra ends up consoling her. But Sandra says throughout all of their history, she's sad to see Parvati go. Alan pretty much lets him know the traitors are one member down and watch out because you might get recruited. And they head off back to the house. Phaedra is nervous knowing that she's going to be doing the murders alone, but she's happy that she got enough people in her corner that pretty much keeps her in power at this point. She's right. Kevin then says to MJ that Peter not having any suspicion of Parvati threw him off. And he doesn't know that, he doesn't know if he really felt that, and he doesn't know if he trusts or believes Peter. I'm like, oh, it's so interesting that you're now saying that. Now you're saying that. I'm like, you're so stupid. You don't know this game. He flips with the wind. But at this point, I guess he has a reason as to why he is suspicious of Peter, because Peter is playing a very stupid game now. He was playing it smart before, but now he's playing stupid. He's getting very cocky. And he's getting too big-headed. You're not really thinking out your moves as well as you should. Peter ends up pulling Kate. Sandra and Phaedra are talking, saying that Peter is giving more traitor. His behavior is more traitor than anybody in that house. And Phaedra says that behavior is just odd because if you're not a traitor, why are you trying to work with a traitor, a.k.a. Parvati? Peter says that they lost numbers to get Phaedra out because he's talking to Kate at this point. And he says that he's not changing his game. He's telling Kate that he was trying to play with Parvati. And she says, I know you did. Like, you just lied to a whole table of people when you knew that she was a traitor all along. And he says that she was going to go tomorrow night. And he says, like, do you believe anything that I was saying? Because, like, whatever. And Kate said, no, I don't. And I don't believe anything that you're saying now. Kate is not here for it. But Kate said that Peter is a traitor to the faithfuls. And she said the reason why she said that is because he lied. Like, he lied to all of them. And she don't like the way he's playing the game. And she says he's annoying. And she says that she's not saying that Phaedra is not a traitor, but she knew that he was doing shady shit. So we get to the murder. Phaedra goes off and she's realizing she got to make that decision alone. Alan ends up joining her and tells her that she can recruit. And she says, I would love to do that. So he tells her there is a twist. You can recruit, but when you recruit, you're going to have to say you either going to join me or you are going to die. I'm like, yes. And in this moment, I was sitting there thinking, who could she possibly choose? And she ends up choosing Kate. And I'm like, I hope Kate's probably going to choose it. Obviously, she's going to choose it because you don't want to go home. But them two together, I'm going to love it because I hope that they can stick this out and ride it all the way to the end. Yes, I'm rooting for Traitors. I am. I'm rooting for the Traitors because I want them two to get to the end. If they split the money, I'm going to be excited. Kate ends up heading to the dungeon, and we'll see what happens next week. I'm tired, y'all. But please, thumbs up the video. I'm giving y'all ASMR. Please, thumbs up the video. Drop a comment down below. Subscribe.